Jews and the God-fearing Gentiles. You know what a God-fearing Gentile is? It's a Gentile who wanted to become a Jew but wouldn't go all the way to circumcision. He was talking to them every day in the marketplace with those who happened to be present. And also some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers were conversing with him. Some were saying, what should this idle babbler wish to say? The word babbler is a Greek word for a bird that goes around picking up seeds all over. So in other words, he's been traveling around the empire getting all these crazy ideas from everywhere, even as far as Judea. And what's this babbler have to say? He seems to be the proclaimer of strange deities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. The Greek word Anastasia, I think they thought he was talking about two gods. Anyway, and they took him and brought him to the Areopagus. This is the Areopagus, the Hill of Mars. It's called the Hill of Mars. And the judges of the Areopagus from Athens would bring people up here to judge them, what they were teaching, because you couldn't just teach anything. So they had to bring them up here. They were going to analyze them. It was like a court for philosophers. They took him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know of this teaching in which you are proclaiming, for you are bringing some strange things to our ears. So we want to know what these things mean. And then in parentheses, Luke says, now all the Athenians and the strangers visiting were used to spending their time in nothing other than telling and hearing of new things. End of parentheses. So Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus, right up there, called Areopagus or Hill of Mars, same thing. And Paul went up there, and you can imagine him starting with his beard wagging as he's all impassioned talking. Men of Athens, I observe that you are very religious in all respects. For while I was passing through and examining the objects of your worship, I also found an altar with the inscription, to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all things in it, since he is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed something. Since he himself gives to all people life and breath and all things, and he made from one man every nation and mankind to live on the face of the earth, having destined their appointed times and boundaries of their habitation, so that they would seek God, if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we move and live and have our being. And even as one of your own poets has said, Paul knew their poets, as one of your poets said, we are his children. Being then the children of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and thought of man. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to all men that people everywhere should repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead. Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some began to sneer, but others said, we shall hear more of this again. So Paul went out in their midst, and some men joined him and believed. Among them was also Dionysius the Areopagite, who became the first bishop of Athens, one of the judges, and a woman named Damaris, and others among them. And that's what Paul said here while he was at this place. When you go by, get a picture of that plaque, that bronze plaque. That is Paul's sermon in Greek. That is the language he spoke it in. He wouldn't have known what in the world I was just saying, because he gave this delivery, a defense of the faith, a sermon. It wasn't a homily, it wasn't in the Mass, but a defense of the faith, an explanation. He gave it in Greek, and that's the language. Some people think that Paul was a big failure here, that he didn't build a big church here like in Thessalonica or some other places, and that he had to leave right away. And that he was preaching philosophy, and then Paul later says, I'm not going to do that. I'm now only going to preach Christ crucified. Some say because he thought of himself as a failure here. I think the exact opposite. I think Paul was masterful here. I think it's an object lesson of the new evangelization. You don't go to someone and start quoting Vatican II documents in the catechism. Janet, can you come here? Janet. You don't start quoting Vatican II documents to somebody. What you do is you go to where they live. You start talking to them based on where they live. And then you begin to work from there. For example, an atheist will come along and say that he doesn't believe in God. Then I